The Hebrew Bible is full of stories where God promises to absolutely wreck people who cause injustice. And honestly, the original audiences were here for it. So we talked about 1 Samuel. There's this priest named Eli whose sons are basically running a religious pyramid scheme. They're supposed to be serving God, but instead they're exploiting people, taking more than their share, probably worse. Classic corrupt leadership, right? So God sends a prophet to Eli with this brutal message. Your family line is done. I'm cutting you off. Your sons will die. I'm raising up someone new who will actually do the job right. And here's what's fascinating. When the original audience heard this story, they weren't clutching their pearls, going, oh my, how violent. They were probably like, finally, someone's doing something about these corrupt jerks. Because here's the thing. In their world, this wasn't just about divine violence. This was divine justice. God seeing injustice and actually intervening. And when you're on the receiving end of oppression, the idea of an active God who fights for injustice, that's not scary, that's hope. But let's be real. This makes a lot of us uncomfortable today. Are we sure we want a God this angry and vindictive? As theologian James Cone points out, there's something super important here. It tends to be white Americans and Europeans who get the most squeamish about divine anger. Why? Because we haven't been on the receiving end of systemic injustice as much. Meanwhile, Black communities, indigenous communities, people in the global South, they're often perfectly fine reading about God wiping out oppressors. When you're David facing Goliath, you want God to have some fight in them. So here's my question. When we take a look at the genocide in Palestine, when we see Supreme Court rulings stripping away transgender rights, when we witness bombing campaigns, how can we possibly believe that God is good and active in the world? Maybe the answer isn't that God is God soft. Maybe it's that God's anger at injustice is part of what makes God loving. And the real question isn't whether God gets angry, it's whether we're on the right side when God does. Some theologians talk about divine Aikido, this idea that evil eventually rebounds on itself. And sometimes God just stops protecting oppressors from the consequences of their own actions. I don't think God acts in direct violence, but I do know this. I pray rage prayers. I ask God to stop injustice, even if it means the unjust face really harsh consequences. Because sometimes love requires anger. Sometimes justice demands disruption. Sometimes the most loving thing God can do is say enough to those who cause harm. The question isn't whether we want a God who fights injustice. The question is, are we fighting it too?